With the very recent release of NSS, the policy document that the Trump administration uh, has written, there has been a fair amount of alarmed discourse on Canadian social media about what this all means and how to react to it. And that alarm extends to the Canadian literati and the Canadian journalist class. I follow a lot of writers, a lot of publishers on social media, and quite a few of them are alarmed, quite critical of where the Trump administration is heading. They're quite critical of what they see a kind of passive response to NSS. For example, one publisher commented that the Globe and Mail has only so far commissioned an article from an American journalist to critique where the Trump administration is going with its national security strategy. Now, in a nutshell, what the Trump administration has done is it has denounced uh, American foreign policy strategy from the Second World War onwards. And it has described that period, the Cold War period, which lasted from, you could argue, the late 1940s, definitely from the beginning of the Korean War until around the beginning of the 1990s. That whole period has been denounced by the Trump administration as a grand mistake in which America decided to take upon its shoulders the burden of quote unquote protecting the rest of the world, funding the rebuilding of Europe, funding overseas foreign aid, spreading democracy, trying to sort of spread its own ideals throughout the world. And then the second part of NSS describes this vision that the Trump administration has in which it will dominate within the Western Hemisphere, that is North and South America, and basically divide the world up into grand spheres of influence in which supposedly the sovereignty of other nations is respected and considered paramount. But above all, the Americans will not further engage in foreign wars unless those wars are seen directly in the interest of the United States, in the interest of defending the United States. Now, on a certain level, this direction could be embraced by a lot of people on the left who are very critical of the American empire. The Americans have had what Wesley Clark called a virtual empire since the 1990s. Mikhail Gorbachev made a similar comment in the 1990s that with the fall of the Soviet Union, the Americans replaced the bipolar world that we had post World War II, that is the USSR and the United States dominating, into a unipolar world with the US dominating. Uh, it's a complicated situation, and there are a lot of takes on it that sort of oversimplify and leave out a lot of important details. One of the most important details, I think, is a definition of the term Cold War. The Cold War is commonly conceived of as a period of great military competition, scientific competition, and political competition between the Soviet Union and the United States, in which the tension really started to sort of manifest itself sometime after World War II. And it's very typical when one reads op-ed pieces in newspapers and so forth to see references to, for example, the Marshall Plan. The Marshall Plan was developed by General George Marshall in the aftermath of World War II when Europe was in ruins. And the idea of the plan was to pour foreign aid into Europe, help it rebuild its economy, and not simply because of American idealism, but to rebuild a European market for American manufacturing. At the same time, that conception, that sort of framework of the Cold War, leaves out a lot. Strictly speaking, what the Cold War refers to is a massive increase in U.S. military spending. And what a lot of people don't know is that after World War II, there was a big push, including by President Harry Truman, to reduce military spending in the United States because typically the United States did not have a huge military during peacetime. So the Cold War really didn't start until 1950, 1949, 1950. And at that time, a secret policy document entitled NSC 68 was developed around April 1950, which called for massive increases in U.S. military spending. And the trigger, the political trigger that brought that about as a political reality and a legislative reality was the outbreak of the Korean War a few months later in June 1950.